Hello everyone and welcome back to the podcast. I'm the Grumpy Surfer and your host Ads Lyson. On the podcast this week I have a guy that started doing Brazilian Jiu Jitsu in 1986, so 7 years before the UFC even made Jiu Jitsu popular in Western culture. He trained with the likes of the Gracies and the Machados, and then became one of the original Dirty Dozen, of which he named, and got his black belt from the Machado brothers in 1997. But prior to starting Brazilian Jiu Jitsu in 1986, he had a breadth of martial art experience, whether it was wrestling or taekwondo. So please enjoy one of the most interesting conversations about Jiu Jitsu I've ever had, and a super nice guy, John Will. John Will, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Ed. Nice to be here.
3 questions. How are you? Where are you? And are you training today?
I'm awesome, and I'm in Geelong, which is a regional town in Victoria, Australia. And yes, I'm training today because I'm not insane.
That is the correct answer.
Awesome.
It's quite interesting, really, and I think it's a bit of a coincidence because when I left the military last year, I set up my own business, therapy business, and doing the Bowen technique. And the Bowen technique originally, I don't know whether you know or you probably do, is it actually originated in Geelong in Australia, which I thought was quite random when I was kind of looking you up a little bit.
That is pretty random. Yeah, wow, it is. Can I ask you a question before we get going?
Yeah, sure.
Where did you serve in the military?
I was in the Royal Marines Commandos.
Okay, got it. Because I've done a bit of work with the Marine Corps in America and other places. So right, okay, I'm with you now. Sykes Fairburn, rock on.
Well, it was kind of one of the things that I was going to talk to you about as well. A little bit later on, was sort of like the combatives and working with the police and that side of things, because as we're going to be talking about jiu-jitsu, I hope, it ties in quite nicely. I mean, let's a little bit of background history, and the reason why, I guess people have an interest in you is that you were one of the original Dirty Dozen, so one of the first 12 non-Brazilian black belts to receive their black belt, and you got it from Machado, didn't you?
Yeah, that's right. Well, actually, I mean, yes, Hegan's the one that tied the belt around my waist, and it was his own belt, which was even more special. But all of the Machados were there, except for Carlos, who was in Texas at the time. But the other 3 were there. So 4 of the Machado brothers. I was lucky in that respect. Well, it was early, right, before they all went their separate ways. And, when I say separate ways, I mean, geographically speaking, they all went and did their own thing, right? But in those days, they were all teaching in the one spot, with the exception of Carlos, who was in Texas. So, yeah, they were all there, and got my black belt in the early part of 1997. So I've been in and out of the Dirty Dozen like a few times, because someone will make a claim that they got their black belt before me. Now I'm out. And then someone calls bullshit, then I'm back in, and it was kind of like that a little bit. Whatever. I mean, but it's become a bit of a thing, I coined the phrase. I was the first one to coin the phrase Dirty Dozen as just a tongue-in-cheek, off-the-cuff thing in an interview, or I forget, in an article or something way back. I just had to come up with a name on the spot, so I just made that name. But it's become it's got a bit of traction, so it's kind of funny.
It's quite strange, isn't it? Because if you kind of look back into the history, and you can go on Wikipedia or other magazine articles that kind of quote these things like the Dirty Dozen as kind of the collective group, it all makes it sound out that everybody that was a non-Brazilian that got their black belt back in sort of like the 90s, you all train together, which isn't necessarily the case. It's just over the years, everyone's just collected all this information and put it together in one thing and gone, oh, look, this is what happened, because, a lot of you guys were all training with lots of different of the Brazilians that came into America at the time. And it just so happened to turn into this, cliche thing with all these videos that have come out now to say, you know, these are the OGs basically.
Yeah. I mean, it was the Machados. It was a little, there were quite a few of us with the Machados all training together. But so there was Bob Bass, who was the first black belt. And then there's me, Dave Meyer, Chris Howder. Who else am I? Gee, I hate to miss out. So there's at least four, right? There might be. So 4 or 5 of the Dirty Dozen all came from the one mat, and then the rest are all spread out all over the place. I think we.
Is it like is there like a yearly seminar where the Dirty Dozen get together and they sort of like spin a few stories and have a few beers, or is it just a case of like, oh, you know, we're part of this name?
Yeah, it's the latter. But it would be a good idea, and you know, we've made noises about doing it, but half of them we couldn't track down. I don't think there's probably there's probably half of them that don't even train anymore, I would imagine, right? Like I didn't know Craig Cook, for example, and I mean, what can I say? I mean, back in those days, Craig Cook was one. I think he got his black belt from Henzo, but it was kind of, look, there were. I'm not making any comment other than there were some people who got a black belt because it was just like, okay, outside of the Dirty Dozen, let me say that. I mean, you can make any inference you wish to make, but outside of there were people back in the very early days. I know a couple that got a black belt. They were not a black belt. They just got a black belt because they'd done a whole bunch of judo when they were young, and then they were on the mat and they were getting older. So someone said, look, well done. Here's a, what do you call it? What would you call it? An honorary black belt, you know, good job, well done. But no one took it seriously, and because they weren't on the mat. And there's people around like that. I'm not taking away from anyone. It was, you know, it's fair enough. But so there was some of that going on back in those days. So when I think of the people who were the OGs, I think of the ones that were on the mat actually training, and none of those particular kinds of people. But yeah, we should get together. I mean, I don't know how many, whether we could round them all up, but it would be a fun thing, right? You know, even if we get together and do a seminar and raise some money for charity. I mean, I'd be more into that. Right, you know, do something so the money goes somewhere, not to them. Probably most of them are desperate and financially living in their mum's basement or something. I don't know.
It's good to see that even the politics of jiu-jitsu is kind of still floating around in the early days, as it kind of is now between academies and clubs and stuff.
Yeah. When I started jiu-jitsu, I started in Gracie Baja, you know, which is now a franchise. Back in those days, it wasn't. It was one mat in Baja. And on that mat were High Gracie, Henzo Gracie, Higan Machado, Hodger Machado, Johnny Machado, Carlos Machado, Jean-Jacques Machado, Helion Gracie, all on the same mat. Like they were all on the one mat. They were just purple belts and brown belts. I think Henzo was a purple belt. So, you know, we're all in the one room. But, you know, nowadays it's like everywhere, and it's a franchise, and it's kind of weird to me, you know, but in those early days, it wasn't political. As far as I was aware anyway, it was quite good. And one, we're all in the same room. And two, I remember being in Rio and Higan saying, let's go over to Carlson's gym. We'll say hello to my Uncle Carlson, you know, we go over there and blah, blah, blah. And, you know, so it was everyone was very friendly and very cool. And there wasn't, I think the federation has made it grow through competition. And then it's been more political because of the competition scene. But back then it was much more of the kind of brotherhood that people would like it to be, you know, back in those early grassroots kind of days. It was pretty cool. And no one knew about it outside of Brazil. So
how do you feel that's kind of changed over the years? Because there's, I mean, it depends how hard you look into it. I've been quite lucky in the fact that because I was in the military, I bounced around lots of different clubs. So I've, when I got drafted somewhere, I'd train there. I'd train at a club for maybe 2-3 years, and then I move off somewhere else. And you read these kind of, they're almost like horror stories, really, that you could say have a negative light, where some coaches won't let their black belts, for instance, go and train anywhere else, or they have a negative sort of like outlook on their students training at other clubs, where I think that's should be quite a normal thing, because if you stay stagnant and you have training partners that you always train with, then you're learning their game and you're not really developing your kind of the way that you train with lots and lots of different people. And I always find that quite strange. And over the last sort of like 5 years, especially where I live, because I live in the southwest of England, which is, there's a jiu-jitsu community, but not like a big city where you've got lots of different clubs all sort of like in a 5 mile or a 5 kilometer radius. And they've got kind of like this almost animosity to a certain extent. And, I've just set my own club up, which is literally today is a year it's been open. And my mindset is like, I just want to train. I don't care about all that. I set something up so I can train, and I enjoy coaching, with my students. And I've said to them, like, if they want to go and train other places, feel free to do that. That's your development skill. Do you see much of that or not?
Yeah, I think that what changed it, like it used to be more of a like hobbyist, like you'd surf at your break, you got your home break, where it is. But you'd be super keen to surf another break on your holiday, or right? You'd be right. But then I think what changed it is two things. Is one is the competition. So competition scene. Now it's like we're gonna be competing against you guys. So that's going to be a problem down the track. So we don't want to get that friendly. We're competing against each other. That changed. It wasn't when I started jiu-jitsu ads, there was a competition scene, but it wasn't like now. Now there's a tournament every weekend if you want to go and find it. So it was a very grassrootsy kind of idea, but the competition scene has grown tremendously over the last couple of decades. And so I think that's created a bit of the, what do you call it? That separated kind of idea. And then the other aspect is business. It's now a business. I mean, it didn't used to be a business. It was just a hobby, right? But now people can make a living. And so if you're making a living and there's another guy in town who's making his living, there's market share. And if there's only 50,000 people in your town, there's limited market share. And now if there's 2 schools, you're dividing that market share. Now you're getting half the income. If there's 3, now you're getting a third of the income. So why would you want to socialize? So now, please don't misunderstand. I'm okay with it, but I had the luxury of being okay with it because I'm financially retired. I'm cool. I don't need money anymore. So that allows me to get up on my high horse and say, of course, bro, I don't care. But when I was paying my house off, I go, no, I need those clients, right? I'll teach any idiot, but now I can go, no, you're not my brand of idiot. You can go somewhere else. So I think I'm not getting up on my high horse, but I think that when you're financially secure, you're much more open and cool about it. But when you're desperate for money and that's your only way to make an income, then you're reluctant to have your students go somewhere else. Possibly because you're scared or have some fear that they might like the other instructor a little better than you and therefore join up and quit your school. Now, I have a particular view on that. If that's the case, they need to be there. Because as you and I probably both would very much agree on, people need to be, we will attract the people that are like-minded. Right. And if the other school is not exactly, it would be more of a problem if the other instructor over there was very similar to you. That would be more of a problem. But they're all, they're different. They might be more hip, more young, more crazy, out partying. So people will need to go, they will eventually end up where they need to be. So I'm okay with it. But yes, I think the sport changed it, and the fact that you can make a business out of it, those two things really made it a little bit less free, let's say.
I think when you look at it like that, you definitely, they're kind of like the underwritten things, right? They're things that people don't talk about. I mean, there's a few things in jiu-jitsu that people don't talk about openly, because it's orientated around the head coach. One of them's gradings. How do you get your next belt? It's almost kind of awkward, isn't it? That sort of conversation. And the second one is the business side of jiu-jitsu as well. It's nice. I enjoy, like for instance, for me, as a you could say a new coach or a new business owner, because that's what I am. I speak freely about it. I have no background in running businesses. I've literally been doing it for the last 18 months, running my therapy business and then opening up this jiu-jitsu school. But I don't have a background in business, but from the jobs that I had when I was in the military, when I left, has kind of given me this mindset and this logical path to go along. All the stuff that's kind of boring, insurances, your stores, all the background stuff that you have to think about to run a place, as well as how do you get your clients in, how do you advertise, have you got an advertisement campaign to bring new students in? How are you when you coach? Word of mouth is a massive thing. Advertising these days, it's all over social media. People are flicking through things like this, and they might see something, but if your name's out there and they see it enough times, they remember it. So all these things are in the background. And I think, like you say, it's the business side of jiu-jitsu is almost kind of the hidden dirty thing, along with asking about gradings and stuff, I guess.
Yeah. I'm one for, like, let's say, being fiscally or financially literate, however people want to interpret that. I think it's incumbent upon us to get across that. Now, not for the idea of, I just want to make money for the making money's sake. There's better ways to do that. But I think that here's what I've learned by getting my shit together when it comes to finances and money is, once you do that well and you don't need money anymore, then you're teaching from the pure place. Because if I teach a seminar like I did last weekend, I'm not doing it for money because I've got that shit sorted. So that means if I'm there for the perfect reason, because I want to be there, not because I have to be there. And that alone is a reason to get your shit together financially. Do you understand what I mean? Whereas if you have to be there because you need the money, because you haven't been financially literate, you haven't educated yourself on how to make money, how to invest it, you haven't done any of that, and therefore you find yourself at 50 years of age with no savings, you don't own your house, none of that stuff, then you're going to be teaching, you're going to be doing anything, you're going to be teaching anyone who can pay you. That's not ideal for them or you.
Well, it comes from it comes from a difficult place then, doesn't it? And
yeah,
and I guess what we were kind of alluding to earlier with your mindset, as well as I guess the reason why you've done so well is, you're one of these guys that you started jiu-jitsu a long time ago, but you've been doing it now for what, nearly 30, 40 years. Now, somebody doesn't do that unless they're passionate about it, and two, that they enjoy doing it and they enjoy teaching. Now, if you do something, again, martial arts isn't exactly the most lucrative thing on the planet to go into business with, let alone, get to the standard where you can say, yeah, I'm an instructor and I'm a coach, especially in jiu-jitsu, because it takes a long time to get to that, say brown belt, black belt level where you can start getting into the coaching side of things. Then if you're doing just to earn a few quid here and there, then I guess you're in it for the wrong reason.
Yeah. And I think you almost touched on this point, Ads. I don't think it's sustainable. You can do anything for the wrong reason for a while, but you can't do anything for the wrong reason for 20 years, 30 years, 40 years. Nah, you've had to have transitioned into the right reason or you're gone. Like anyone can fake it for a bit, but it's not sustainable. You have to find ways to keep, extracting joy from what you do as you go along so that you can do it weirdly, paradoxically, perhaps, so that you can do it for long enough to eventually make money. So, right. If you go into martial arts, particularly BJJ, to make money, it's almost guaranteed to fail. You have to go into it because it provides you with enough challenge, problem solving, complexity to keep you there so that you can do it for long enough to save money for 30 years and invest it and then make you a couple of $1 million, right? So it's, you got to take the right approach. So it's sustainable. It's almost like anything, like everything. I used to say, everything's a 10-year plan. Everything's a 10-year plan. Whether it's a BJJ Black Belt, home ownership, making $1 million, speaking another language, it's a fucking 10-year plan. And it's probably more like a 20-year plan. It's like this. So if you're going into something, I can do this for a bit, and it's 3 years, no, I don't see those people lasting long enough to do well.
I mean, you say that, the 10-year plan side of things. I only ever really heard that in the military. You've got your 1-year plan, your 5-year plan, your 3-year plan, your 10-year plan. Where do you see yourself in 20 years and all that sort of thing. And it's quite interesting you say that, because I could have quite easily just gone, feet both straight into this. As a business side of things, I could have gone straight in, bought a whole bunch of matting, spent a lot of money like renting somewhere, leasing contracts, all that sort of stuff. I've got a pension now, so it's not the best pension in the world. Let's just say that, but it's enough to kind of make me comfortable and I'm not hanging out for money through teaching jiu-jitsu and doing therapy. I've got quite a bit of free time, and I was never going to get into this. And I didn't want to get into something where I was working a 9-to-5 job, waiting for the weekend and kind of my life getting wasted away. I wanted to be able to enjoy what I was doing. I could go surfing, I could train as much as I could, but then with my pension and making a bit of money in the background, just live comfortably. But my kind of point is that I could have just jumped feet first into it with a bit of the gratuity money that I got as a payout, and all that got fluttered away, and just gone straight into something. But then I haven't got any clients. Your students are clients; they're paying customers. And there's a guy that I know that did this for 5 years. He went and he built his school up, but the price of how much it was costing him, his overheads, to the stage of the membership fees and the money that was coming in, he basically didn't make any money for 5 years, and he had to stop it in the end. And that's a bad situation.
Yeah. There's a lot of ways to, it's weird, but there's a lot of ways to make a living, let's say, out of jiu-jitsu or martial arts, but jiu-jitsu. And you can have a giant school and 500 students. I know people that have got that. You can have a small school. You can be a Chris Howder and have it in your garage. Zero overhead. I would always, if someone asked my advice on it, not that you are, but I would always err on the side of sustainability. Like, how do you need to set yourself up, given your circumstances and where you are in life and how old you are and all of that? How do you set yourself up so that you can just keep doing that for as long as you can? Now, if that means you're in a garage with no overhead and you've only got 25 students, you will end up doing better than someone with a big school and 150 students in the long run. So there is no right way. It's just all of that. And the other thing is, it's going to sound a bit philosophical, a bit Buckminster Fullerish, but the money should come as a consequence of what you're doing, but not the reason for doing it. Right? It's a consequence in the same way that cross-pollination in flowers is a consequence of the bee going flower to flower collecting pollen. It's not the reason the bee does that. The bee is not trying to cross-pollinate flowers. It's just collecting pollen. I'm not trying to make money. I'm doing jiu-jitsu really well. Now, as a consequence of that, I've gotten all the money I'll ever need. Do you understand? There's a difference, right? I'm sure you do. But I've seen people going in there and they're all about making the money. And it's just like, wow, no, you should be for other reasons. And if you do whatever the fuck it is, like if it's folding airplanes, doing origami and making paper planes, if that's your thing and you are really excellent at it and you're one of the best ones, money will come. You'll find a way. But it can't be the reason, because I don't think it's sustainable. So.
You and my dad would get on amazing. You've got because
we're both old.
I did not say that. That came from you, not me.
Stab.
Yeah, it's a very unique thing what you've just said there, because not a lot of people have that insight or the or kind of like I guess it comes with experience, trial and error and failure and getting back up and resetting those goals again. But I think people don't have realistic expectations as well. It's I mean, you can use this analogy as your new white belt that joins your club or your academy, or surfing, for instance, where they like the idea of it. They want to be good at it, but they want to be good at it real quick. They don't want to do sort of like the hard yards. Jiu-jitsu, full well, it takes a long time to become even remotely semi-good at it. You can define that in whatever way you can think. Same as surfing as well. It's a skill. You can't just expect to become a professional in a day's tuition. You have to spend the hours on the mat, in the sea. The classic cliche of your 10,000 hours to become even remotely good at something, and it takes a long time to do it. And I guess in a way, that's, if you stick at it, it gives that personal sort of like satisfaction, knowing that you've got to a point where you go, do you know what? I actually worked really hard for this. And all that experience that comes from behind it, your coach as well kind of puts their philosophical outlooks onto things and almost becomes like the guru. And then that's kind of comes back to the idea that if you're a really good coach and you're a really good instructor, you're almost passing your life's lessons onto other people as well as teaching them something really cool.
Yeah. I think very few people are going to go into choose jiu-jitsu as a martial art if their goal is to get a black belt. There's easier ways. Buy one. Do taekwondo. So that's not your motivation. You get the black belt as a consequence of just doing the work. And you get money, in my view, as a consequence of doing the work for long enough and investing the right way. So, but it's not the reason. Like a black belt's not the reason. So for me, it's all the same. And in jiu-jitsu, like to extend the analogy, You know, you wouldn't have just a guard game, right? What would you say to me if I just had a guard game? You know, you go, you need to learn to pass. You need to learn to finish. You've got to have a takedown game. You've got to have some self-defense applications. You know, you've got to be able to, someone's whacking you on the head a whole bunch of times. You've got to be able to cover up. So you would tell me that you can't just have a guard game. And then when it comes to income, you can't just have one income stream. You're already doing jiu-jitsu. You've got your pension, you've got your Bowen. So you've already got at least 3 that I know about. And it's those 3 together that make you more complete. And if you take away one, then you're like everyone else, right? So yeah, I don't see a distinction between jiu-jitsu and life. Like every aspect of my life and every aspect of jiu-jitsu is all the same fucking thing. It's all congruent everywhere for the same reasons.
What drove you to doing martial arts in the first place? Because you know you were quite competent in a few other different arts before you even took up jiu-jitsu. So, you know, what drove you to it, and what drew you to jiu-jitsu after becoming quite competent in those different martial arts?
I started doing martial arts probably for the same reason that a lot of people have studied, in that, you know, I got into a few. My father was a policeman, and then he changed jobs, locations a bit, like an army kid. You know, I guess so he moved around. So you're always the new kid in the school halfway through the school term. And so the pecking order of who's friend, whatever's already been established, and you're the new kid in there. So you're getting bullied or getting into some fights and stuff. And I was fearful as a child because of some of those. I remember a couple of people in different places, like they'd be every day in my face bullying. And I just went, I just need to build my confidence. So I started with wrestling, and then wrestling worked because, you know, I'd take them down and mount on top and just go to town, ground and pound, and that worked every fucking time. Like, right. And then I took up Taekwondo, and every fight I got into after that, I'd still go take them down, mount and ground and pound. And then, so I went, well, this is not working. I got my Taekwondo Black Belt, and but I wasn't using it in any of the fights. And so then I went to Southeast Asia and trained in Indonesia, Thailand, India, Japan, China, and trained around for 10 years, trying to, you know, find what I was looking for. Being a dojo rat, I had no money, but then I made a magazine called Blitz, which is an Australian martial arts magazine. I just started it in my own house with a Commodore 64 computer. It worked out. It was only 4 times a year, seasonal publication, but it made me enough pocket money. It didn't make me rich, but it made me, you know, it made me enough. It made me the same as wages, you know, working in a hardware store or something, you know, like, so, or Tesco, you know, that kind of money. But it was, but at the same time, I had a freedom of time. So, and that allowed me to travel around. Now, in the early part of that magazine, there was a guy came from Brazil to Australia, and he put out a challenge for money for anyone who wanted to fight. This is in Valetudo. Like nowadays ago, people go, oh yeah, I get it, but not in 1986. In 1986, that was a weird thing to do. Like challenge the martial art community to a fight for money. Like that was radical back then. So I wrote this 1-page article about it. No one took up the challenge. So I became interested. What the hell? Who is this guy? What's going on? So with a little bit of detective work, I heard he was a jiu-jitsu guy. I didn't even know what that was. I thought jiu-jitsu was, you know, Japanese jiu-jitsu. So I ended up going over to Los Angeles, rocked up to Horry and Gracie's garage, did my first 5 lessons. After I did an interview with him, he said, do you want to do some lessons? I said, sure. I paid through the nose for those lessons. Like it cost me all my money for 5 lessons. Then I had to go home to Australia because I was broke. But I learned enough in those 5 lessons that when I came home, I was trying to fight every judo black belt, karate black belt, taekwondo black belt that I could find. I'd come in and take them down with my wrestling, and then I'd jiu-jitsu them with my armbar and my back choke and my Americana, you know, very basic stuff. And I thought, shit, this is working. Like, I should do 10 lessons instead of 5. So I saved up. 6 months later or something, I went back to America, back to Horian's garage with the intention of not training there because I couldn't afford it. of getting an address in Brazil where I was pretty confident it would be free. That's not true, but I thought that because surely it's got to be the same as India and Thailand and everywhere else, where if you just turn up, they're going to let you train. So I went to Oriens, and Gracies Machado was teaching there at the age of 18. And he said to me, "Don't train here, you idiot. Go to Brazil." And I said, "Funny you should say that. This is with like no English." And he said, "I'm going down there next week. Come with me." And we've just been great friends ever since. So that's how it started for me. And I went to Brazil, Barra Gracie, and it was only 5 or 6 years later I realized, holy shit, where I was and who I was training with. I just pure luck, right? And then the UFC happened in 1992. And then I think, 93, one of the two. And then, then the world started finding out about it. But I was a purple belt when the first UFC happened.
Yeah, it must be quite, as you look back at it now and you look back in time and you see kind of like the, because jiu-jitsu's got so popular now, it's one of the fastest growing sports in the world because of, the UFC and the One Championship and Bellator and, and all these things that are becoming mainstream media, regardless of what sort of element of martial arts they're using. And you were just doing it because you'd started a magazine up, you were interested in martial arts, and it was just kind of, I guess you could call it fate. You're in the right place at the right time. And right. Now, 30, 40 years later, you kind of look back on it and go, it's quite funny. I just rocked up and I was just training with some guys, and they just appear to just so happen to be the guys. And now, they're my mates, and I am where I am. It's kind of, it's quite funny.
I'll tell you a funny story. You'd appreciate this. I was sitting in Barra Gracie one day on the side of the mat. Renzo was sitting next to me. For those who don't know, Renzo Gracie, most people know who that is. He was sitting next to me. And why I say that is because Renzo was one of the very few people in that mat that could speak English. He could speak English. Everyone else couldn't. Except for Carlos Machado. Carlos Machado spoke English. Renzo Gracie spoke English, and I don't think anyone else did. So Renzo's sitting next to me. We're on the wall. These guys start coming in the door. Fabio Gurgel, and a lot, some big names. And everyone's starting to go, "Oh, wow, oh, look who's here." And I turned to Renzo and I said, "Is it some special day?" And he goes, "Oh, no, that's a top guy. He's this guy, they're famous guy." I said, "So why are they coming here today? What's the deal with that?" And he said, "Oh, they've come to train with him." And he pointed to Regan, who was sitting next to me. I've looked past Regan and gone, "With who?" He goes, "With Regan." I've gone, "With Regan? Why would they want to train with Regan?" And he looked at me like I was insane. And he goes, "Don't you know where you are?" I go, "What are you talking about?" I just thought they were my mates on a mat. And I didn't realize that at that point, Regan was like the best one in Brazil and all of that stuff. And so I forget, I don't know, but I've been doing jiu-jitsu for a bit. So I didn't know. They were just my friends who happened to be, doing jiu-jitsu. I never thought, I didn't choose them because they were great. Because, when you're a white belt, anyone's great. Anyone blue belt or higher, it's great. So what could I tell the difference between that world champion and a blue belt? I probably couldn't tell the difference. I chose them because they were just nice people and we gelled, so connected. But yeah, I didn't know who I was training with until years after it started.
There's a lot to be said about There's a lot to be said about social media and kind of the incorporation of the internet into modern day society. At the early 2000s, late 90s, where everybody's got access to everything now. You've got all these tutorials that people delve into. You got YouTube videos. BJJ fanatics. People pay through the arm and leg to get Gordon Ryan's latest video that's like probably, I don't know, 10 hours worth of tuition that you're never really going to practice in your own house. You're going to watch it and then try and incorporate that on the mat. Maybe, I don't know. I find it quite funny, really.
That's what I think. I mean, people have asked me, the question I've often been asked is, what made jiu-jitsu? Why is it taken off? And in my view, it's just because it started at exactly the same time the internet started. That to me is the reason. If it could have been Taekwondo. Now, it probably wouldn't have got as much traction, but I think it would have been. So the UFC happened at about the same time that the internet started happening. So it was just a beautiful timing.
Yeah. Especially when you look back and you look at the guy that went into the UFC and took down all these massive guys in the ring, a guy that, without being horrible about it, kind of looked like your dad. Your dad's in the ring with all these guys, and then all of a sudden he's taking them down, he's taking them back, and he's choking them out. He's not even striking. He doesn't want to strike because he's kind of making a point. And when that comes out on VHS and everyone's going, "Oh, have you seen this?" Yeah, I can see that, especially if you are into martial arts as well, and everyone's like that. Oh, how'd you do that? And especially in this country as well, jiu-jitsu didn't really kind of take off until, probably when you got your black belt, sort of, 97, 98, early 2000s, people were...
Started the millennium is when it started to...
Yeah.
Like, that's normal people would do it. Prior to that, there were people doing it, but they were all fighters. Like, I think in the early days, the only people coming in were people that were fighters or thought they were fighters or thought they were hard. That's the only people. Normal humans weren't walking in. Accountants, engineers, people who work at Denny's, they weren't in. No way. It was just fighters until about, as you say, maybe 2000 or something.
What's your thoughts on, BJJ self-defense versus competition versus, recreation? What's your thoughts on that?
You've summed it up. You did a good job. Like, I think they're kind of like almost three. That's the streams, like there's competition, it's one stream, and there's self-defense, which is another stream, and there's just hobbyist recreational, and that's, let's call that lifestyle, right? There's another, right? And they're all equally valid, right? But they're all quite different. So where we get the problems is when your pamphlet says it's doing all three. That's tricky. There's a lot of I think there's a fairly big disconnect between what a lot of people's pamphlet says and what they're actually doing. I mean, self-defense is different. Is the people punching you in the face? Are there two of them? Has one got a knife? Right. So a lot of jiu-jitsu people are vulnerable in a self-defense situation because of their effectiveness. like they're so effective against one person that they automatically assume that they're good for self-defense. Whereas someone who is pathetically bad at Taekwondo or Aikido in terms of fighting might do better because they're going to run away. right. So sometimes I think jiu-jitsu guys can get themselves confused between effective self-defense, which you and I know if you've done any warfare, you don't want to pull the Taliban guy in your guard and whack on a triangle. You don't want to go deep half guard. So you've got to realize, and not even UFC, like even MMA, it's like the same thing. I've run a bunch of scenarios where, you put this scenario on, right? So someone, and the two or three commandos or high level martial arts, guys might take the guy down in the scenario and dominate him and mount him. And then we just have a kid in the corner with the screwdriver. And his job is just to wander up and just go in the back of the neck with the screwdriver. And usually, weirdly enough, when you run that basic scenario, the tougher the martial artist, the more likely they're going to die, because they're all overly focused on doing their skill on this guy, but they just don't see the kid. Whereas the housewife would probably do better in that scenario, right? So I think sometimes hardcore, competent jiu-jitsu guys can fall victim to their own skill set. So anyway, I'm going down a pathway there, but I think it's important to separate them out. Now, having said that, I think that an academy wants to have a focus. Is it lifestyle? Is it competition? Or is it self-defense? But dabble in the other two. Right? So I think you've got a responsibility to dabble in the other two, right? So pick one and make that your focus, but dabble in the other two. I think that's a reasonable approach.
I think you kind of tied three things all together there, really, is, the self-defense side of it. We talked a little bit, touched on it briefly about, the military side of things with combatives and all that sort of thing. And I try, this is one of the things that I became really frustrated with before I left, because in the Marines, we've got a Royal Marines close combat system, which is loosely based on the MAP system that the USMC have. We have guys that go over to America and do their MAP syllabus, and then they bring it over, and we just incorporated this syllabus all into one program now that our recruits, or the Royal Marine recruits, take through. Do through training. The reason why I got kind of frustrated with it a little bit was because in the Marines, because we've got the longest training that takes you through sort of like the infantry skills all the way into doing commando raids and teaching you how to operate in small groups, near enough kind of SF level, but not that step up. The guys were very much like, we're super hard, kind of the classic cliche, like, you don't know when the red mist comes down, I'll bang you out, that kind of thing. And it kind of hit home a little bit when I was running a gym, doing all the physical training programs and stuff for one of the commando units. And they transferred over to do like the maritime side of things. So they're doing small man team onto boats, clearing the ships out, combative, non-combative boardings and all that sort of thing. And they went into a room, and there was someone in there, playing enemy, and they went to do a 4-man clearance of the room, and it took 4 of them to take one person down. And a friend of mine that I was training with on the mats came and said, this shouldn't be happening. And I was like, look, mate, I feel you. Guys think they can do these amazing, brilliant things, and they could take anybody down, but actually they don't really have any skill level at all. They do about 18 hours worth of training when they go through recruit training, but then after that there's no retention. They don't train it at least once or twice a week, for physical exercise, even just to keep on top of it. And that's all it would take. They do phys every single morning at 8:30 when they turn 2, and they do phys, and they come back and they go on with their daily work. It would only incorporate it into that. And I was getting really frustrated with it, and I was trying to say, look, the guys need to do this. And at the end of the day, if you don't teach somebody how to fight without a weapon, then when they have a weapon and everything jams up and they've got to deal with somebody, they might be on their own, they might be with a team, they might have to take people down and arrest and restrain them. If they can't do that properly and efficiently, they're not doing their job correctly. Yeah. And it was very much like, it was because it wasn't something that they had to do to get a tick in the box to go away and deploy. Then it was just kind of, if someone was interested in jiu-jitsu or grappling or something like that, then that's the only way that those lads would end up training and doing that. Now, they used to ask me, can you do a session? And I was like, yeah, I can. But they need to keep coming back and doing a takedown or scenario session for an hour every 6 months is not really going to cut it. And and it used to break me. And we spend so much time trying to persuade people to learn how to fight when their job is actually fighting. And it was just really frustrating that, you know, and when I left, I was just kind of like, do you know what? I'm just flogging the dead horse and I'm just going to leave it.
That's one of the problems with large military organizations, and I've worked for, you know, quite a few of them, and government organizations, which is slightly more grey. There's black, there's grey, there's a green, they're all quite different. Blue, the coppers, but they're what was I going to say? Oh, they're slow. The larger the organization, the less agile. The harder it becomes to change and switch up and adapt to teaching scenarios. How do you design scenarios? What's the best way, you know, in 20 hours or 40 hours or 200 hours to get these people to the highest level? Technology, all that technology is changing rapidly. And sometimes, you know, like I can be at some parts of it, I think I'm at the cutting edge of it, coming up with ways to do it that achieve an outstanding result. But large organizations, they are reluctant, right? Small, agile groups can do it. They can have someone, they're autonomous. They can have someone in charge and go, shit, we need to do that right now. And we need to ditch what we've been doing now and do that. That's not most people. So they, you know, they come up with a syllabus, they write a syllabus like the MAP program, for example. And that I started helping out with that with Colonel Joe Shushko when that first came out, designing and once it's in place, it's really hard to change it. I mean, you can build some flexibility. If you're smart in the design process, you can build some flexibility in there that allows for you to adopt better practices and stuff. But it's usually pretty difficult to change things. I mean, look at most of the large military organizations, and I'm sure you'll attest to the fact that some of them were still teaching the Fairburn-Sykes kind of unarmed combat methods of how long ago? Like, oh my God, things have changed. Things are changing. Like, I've changed my mind on a lot of that stuff in the last 2 years. Right. So, you know, they're slow to change. They're slow to adapt new practices, and they're usually way, way behind the eight ball, with the exception of a few greyish organizations, which they need it because they're going to be deployed in weird capacities. And so they need to be really up for that. They'll do anything and spend any amount of money to get the right outcomes. But yeah, I mean, sometimes a bean counter, an accountant. This happened in Australia a while ago. I went up to Canberra and I was the main person involved in designing the 40-hour defensive tactics program, meaning unarmed, for the Australian Army. And so MSDs, military self-defense, we called it military self-defense. And so I put a lot of thought and experience into designing 40 hours. So basically 40 lesson plans with some assessments all throughout there. And we spent time, 6 months making it all happen. We assembled a team of, I think it was 8 or 9 full-time MSD instructors who had to qualify and get in there and then get across all the stuff. And then it ran for a couple of years. And then one day, an accountant said, we're military. We've got guns. What are we spending money on that for? Because I guess it's like everywhere. This person probably just got the job. They wanted to prove that they can save money. And they nixed it. I mean, what would he know about like rocking up on a vehicle, a vehicle checkpoint, and realizing you can't shoot every angry villager in the head, mate, just because they want to go and see their cousin in the next village and they're getting irate. You have to physically restrain that person. And like 99.9% of the military, it's hands-on, not pulling triggers. They don't get that. He just made that stupid call. Oh, we got guns. We don't need this stuff. And basically destroyed the program. Like, what? So that used to frustrate me. You know, you put all this work in and then some third-party bureaucrat kills it.
It doesn't sound too unfamiliar, if I'm honest. You know, it happens regularly. And those are that's the sort of the opinion and what happens when people change in jobs, right? You know, someone comes up with a new smart ideas club. Oh, we don't need to do that. Oh, fucking why not? What does that say on your arm? Yeah, it's like Commando was supposed crazy. To like, yeah, we're supposed to do this shit. Like what are you talking about? And then 9 times out,
consult the end user, like radical concept.
Yeah, 9 times out of 10, like the reason why they've shit canned it is because they also don't like it. Because let's be honest, fighting confrontation is really uncomfortable, and people don't generally like it. So, you know, if they don't like something, they don't do it. If it's hard, they don't do it either.
Yeah, it's kind of weird, but
let's change the direction of the conversation a little bit. So, you know,
talk about something other people are interested in.
In your opinion, what makes a good academy or a good jiu-jitsu school?
Well, again, it's, you know, there are different kinds, right? Is it lifestyle? Is it competition? Is it self-defense? So they're 3 quite different things. So if you've joined one school for one reason, but you're not getting, you know, what you need for that, then it might be a great school, but it might not be a great school for you. Right. So I think it's good for people they might have to try, you know, jump in, put their feet in the water for a bit and just get used to it, experience jiu-jitsu in any form until they get square away in their head why they're actually what they want. Because they might know, right? They might say, I'm here for self-defense, but that's not really why they're there. They're there because they want to get fitter. They're there because they're not confident. They're there because they've got no friends and suddenly they've got friends. It's a socialization. All awesome reasons, right? So I don't think it's hard to know. Like, I've got enough experience to know that when you ask people at the beginning of their training why they're there, it's almost never the real reason. So it might take the average person a while to figure out what value they're getting from it. And then at that point, you might realize you're not in the right school. You're not getting the thing you're looking for.
So I guess that really that would really come down to as well, like, you know, your student retention as well, wouldn't it? You know, how that person has a rapport with you as a coach when you're coaching, because, you know, not everybody's going to get on with each other, right? You know, some people have different personalities and they kind of clash a little bit. People have different learning styles as well, you know, in the way that you teach. If you've never done a coaching course before, and you can understand that people have different learning abilities and how to teach one way, but then they're not getting it. How do you turn that around so they actually, you know, can learn that technique that you're teaching? You know, how they get it. If you can understand that, I guess that's how you retain that student as well.
In my own school, I have 4 different levels of classes for adults, right? So I have a beginners. So tonight's my beginner class. I will turn up there and there might be someone that's their first night. There might be someone that's been there for probably 10 weeks, right? So you've got to be in the beginners for 3 months. And then I've got novice class after that, white belt with a couple of stripes. Then I've got intermediate level after that. And then I've got advanced, you know, you've got purples, browns, and black belts in there. So I've got 4 different levels of classes. Now, to get back to my beginner class, twice a week, Tuesday, Thursday, I'm doing 3 things in my beginner class. 1, I'm giving you some self-defense because you've said it to me when you walked in the door. You want to learn self-defense. And even if that's not why you're there, you've said it. So it's incumbent upon me to give you some self-defense. So shell, crashing in, clinching, fence, question, preemptive striking, a la Jeff Thompson. So I'm teaching some self-defense in there. I'm also preparing you for my BJJ class. So I've got 4 specific ground drills, positional drills, that is preparing you for when you come into the actual novice class. So I'm self-defense. I'm preparing you for my BJJ class. And the third thing, which is to my point to your question, is I'm teaching you how to learn. So I'm teaching you, actually training you how to learn, to make you more receptive to my coaching style and how it's going to work. And so that's why in my beginner class, I take a 3-pronged approach to self-defense, prep for the BJJ class, and how you can be a fantastic adult learning machine. So that's where my effort is going. And if you don't do that, and I put to you that many schools do not do that, then it's harder, right? So I think that's really important.
I think that comes down to as well, like how do you maintain that student as well? You know, how do you keep them training? We've all seen this the saying, or it's kind of, I guess, a classic cliche that once you get your blue belt, that's the easiest time to give up doing jiu-jitsu as well. And if you've got that environment where you can kind of keep on top of that, and you're giving them inspiration, and they're still learning, and they don't kind of plateau or take a nosedive, that's kind of how you keep them going, I guess, a little bit. I don't know. I don't really know the answer to that.
There's a lot of things that come into play about retention, but one of them, it's like there's a few things, but one of them would be like, if I go in the army and I join the military there, I mean, there's a lot of levels. You're not going to throw me into Royal Commandos. You're not going to do it. You're going to go, whoa, bro, you need to start at infantry, or, or basic training, or whatever you call it. So, and I think the jiu-jitsu schools do not do that. They go, you're in general population. So you've got some brown belt who doesn't give a shit about you. That's no way to keep students. In fact, that's Darwinian. And who's going to end up surviving that and staying is the guy who doesn't need it. So the first thing people have to do is separate out. You've got to have a beginner specific class. And they go, oh, but I can't do that because I've only got 3 beginners. So I'll wait. What are you going to wait for? You're never going to get 10 or 20 because it'll never happen. You build it, they will come. You make that beginner class, there might only be one person in it. You give them the best private lesson of their life, and you keep doing it. Next night, there's going to be his friend. Next night, there's always 15 to 20 in my beginner class. You have to do it. So that's one of the ways you can retain people, by not throwing them in a raging torrent of a river when you're trying to teach them how to swim. We wouldn't do it with our kids, but they do it with people in jiu-jitsu. Idiots. That's number one. Curriculum, like what are you teaching them? In what order? Like if you were teaching engineering ads and you're an engineering lecturer at university, so you get them all in there, would you open that book at a random page and say, let's start here? No. You wouldn't do it in any other field. You would start at the front of the book because there will be a reason why they would want to know about that before they want to know about that. There's not enough of that going on. So if you give people a very progressive, logical, rational approach to learning things, they will tend to stay. If you don't, they're confused as all hell. So that's 2. I can come up with 100, but it's all of them put together that allows you to retain students. Because the average person, as you say, if they jump in there and had that Darwinian experience, because you put them in general population, so it's been, let's say, hellish for them, and then they've got through and somehow got to blue belt, and then in their mind they're going to go, I've got to do all of that again for purple belt, bro, I'm out. Of course they're out. It shouldn't be. This should not come as a shock to anyone. But if it's been progressive and thought out, and a lot of things in jiu-jitsu are not thought out. They're just and everyone is in the same class, and it is just taught in a random order. Like, oh my God. Like if I'm talking about, name anything in jiu-jitsu, there's the crucifix, something similar, passing the guard. The average jiu-jitsu school does not think about what should be the first guard pass. Because I could prove that to you, because I could ask them that question, they'll have an answer, and I'll say why. And they won't know why. So when you ask why they're doing it in that order, they go, I don't know. Well, maybe you should know. I know.
This kind of brings me on to my kind of next point. You kind of leading. It's like you've got my notes that I've got written up here, and you're going down them for verbatim at the moment. You know, I had a student in my class last night, and he was trying to, you know, I do something very similar to what you're talking about. So I teach maybe 2 or 3 things from each position. So open guard, closed guard, side control, back control, and just keep going over and over and over and over those until I know that, you know, they're picking it up and they start doing it autonomously. And then they'll start throwing a few more little technical details into, you know, to develop them. And he was trying to do this kind of guard pass where you've got the trouser grips, and you step in with one leg, and then you do like a really big back step. And I'm like, mate, you can't even do a Toriander pass yet. So there's no point in even thinking about that. And I think people are quite quick to rush to where the techniques, you know, I call it the circle of doom, fad techniques that have, you know, are popular. So, you know, a few years ago was leg locks, you know, when Gordon Ryan and, you know, the Danaher Death Squad were doing like leg locks. Leg locks became, you know, super popular. Everybody wanted to do it. And now it's kind of tethered off a little bit, you know, Gordon Ryan, you know, obviously the pinnacle of jiu-jitsu at the moment. Everybody knows his name. You know, he's kind of doing them, but then he's gone back to basics again. He's gone back to like pressure passing, you know, securing somebody, knee slice passes, leg pummeling, all these sort of things that kind of fundamental jiu-jitsu. He's kind of going back to that and just showing how good it is. Like Roger Gracie, you listen to how Roger talks, and he's like, he doesn't know lots and lots of technical techniques. He knows how to do the fundamentals well, but do them in a way that people can't stop him from doing it. They know what he's doing, but they just can't stop him doing it. And these, I call them fad techniques. People trying these lots of different things. And I think if you're trying to teach lots of different things, like you're saying, it becomes super confusing for students as well. And they kind of don't know where they are when they actually start to spar. Yeah.
Beginner. I walk in tonight after my beginner class tonight at 7 o'clock. I got my advanced guys. I can be teaching Kani Basami entries into inside Ashigarami, inverting out, you know, backside 50-50 helix. It doesn't matter because they've been training a couple of years before they got in there. So it doesn't matter. But one of the problems we talked earlier on about the internet being a boon for jiu-jitsu in that, you know, it spread it, right? But there's a downside, and that is prior to the internet, the only way you people would come up again with see a new technique was physically going to a competition. Oh shit, Philippe beat everyone with this bloody thing. We better go home, workshop that, come up with counters and counters to counters and counters to counters. So it was a very slow, I'm going to use a word, thorough, slow/thorough, organic process. Now you've got the internet, so you can shortcut that and be distracted and pulled off mission because you're seeing someone do something before that you haven't seen. Someone's successful at something, they beat someone in a tournament, the spotlight's on them, and people go, oh my God, I should do that because I should do what the best guy's doing, right? No, you should not, because he got there via a pathway. You've just been dropped off 20 meters from the top of Everest by chopper. He had to get at base camp. He had to acclimatize. He had to make his way up the mountain. He had to learn teamwork. He had to do all this shit. You've been dropped off by helicopter, you peanut. You are not qualified to be doing what that guy's doing. Unless you go through maybe a short, a more accelerated version, but you've got to follow with the footsteps. And you're looking straight at the end of the puzzle and you're looking at the solution without even understanding the problem. So that's a drama. And that's why people can get very distracted by, what the current person, the Gordon Ryans of the world are doing. And part of the job of a good instructor is to keep them tethered to the place they are now, right? And for a beginner, that might be just doing some walks at home. For a slightly more advanced, it might be doing some walks with a backpack. Slightly more advanced, it might be doing some walks in the Himalayas with a backpack. Slightly more advanced, it might be going to base camp and acclimatizing and doing some walks. You're not ready to be climbing Everest yet. Just because there's a guide that can do it for you doesn't mean you should be doing it.
Exactly.
So,
which leads me on to the instructor side of things. So one of the questions that I kind of play with in my head, and I have a chat with every now and again with some of the guys that I train with is, should your instructor compete? Just to kind of put proof in the pudding. Now, we talked about at the very start, you've got your different types of people. You've got your recreational people, you have your competitors, and you have your people that are just doing it for self-defense reasons. But, in your opinion, what should your instructor do? If you've got guys going to a competition, should he be going to that competition too and putting proof in the pudding, or, what's your opinion on it?
Okay. This is an easy question to answer. Let's just take it to any other field. Does every swimming coach have to compete in every swimming tournament? There's swimming coaches I know, world class. They can't even swim. They're a fucking coach. That's what they're good at. And it's easy to look at the other side of it. What about the best competitors? I know a lot of world champions. Some of them are my friends. Can't teach their way out of a wet paper bag. So different skill set. You don't need one. Now, not everyone needs to compete. They can be experts at analyzing how the best competitors are competing and what they're doing and do their job beautifully well. So no, you don't need that. That shouldn't be something that you need to do.
It's interesting you say that, because and I thoroughly, I concur with it, and I'm going to use this as a personal. I'm going to use myself as sort of like the pinnacle of what we're kind of talking at, is that I've competed when I was, when I started doing jiu-jitsu, white belt, blue belt, purple belt, I competed. You might find this, quite amusing, but from kind of my background, but I didn't really enjoy it. I didn't enjoy the competing side of it. I always felt there was too much internal pressure to perform, because when it comes down to your coach as well, because I guess some people compete to show their coach that they're ready to get promoted. Maybe, I don't know. They want to do well for their team. But I always found that there was a lot of internal stuff for me. Like I just didn't enjoy like people weight cut, didn't enjoy like doing any of the weight cutting. And then when I got into actually doing the physical competing, the way that I like to train and the way that I like to do things, it just didn't fit right with me. I didn't find it defined who I was to compete. I didn't really know why I was doing it. I mean, I started doing jiu-jitsu because when the waves were shit, I was sick of going to the gym and doing, these programs. I was sick of doing the same thing over and over again. So I asked a couple of guys that were like mega into it and said, should I start it? And every gym I went and worked in from then on, I set up a dojo and some matted areas, and we trained. That's how I started. I was coaching jiu-jitsu since I was a blue belt, because my job in the Marines was an instructor as a coach. So I was innately good at it anyway, because I'd been taught how to do that. So from a personal level, just because I didn't enjoy competing doesn't mean that the people that I have been coaching and I coach now, they don't find that an enjoyable experience, which I'll go along to competitions and I'll coach them from the sideline. So you saying that is almost kind of like a physical reinforcement, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, everyone's got different motivations, Are you fighting for your country? You're fighting for the guy next to you. You're fighting for yourself. People got different motivations, different things that keep them there. So I think you need to provide a way forward for them if you want to keep them, but it shouldn't be like that's what we're all about.
Listen, John, we've been talking now for over an hour, and I super appreciate your time. So I've got one more little question for you. Really, is what does John Will do outside of jiu-jitsu? What do you like doing outside of the mat?
My wife, she, me. She's making funny girl over there. I like
the way you said that was was a little bit strange.
That's okay. Leave it in. Leave it in. I like one of the hobbies that I like to do is I like remote wilderness trekking, but I like fly fishing. So I combine those two things. Nice. So I like to go, to some remote spots, maybe dropped off by chopper or something like that remote, and then do a walk up a river system or through a range or whatever. And then I'm camping and fly fishing and all of that. So that would probably be, I've done a lot of that all over the world and here. So that's probably the hobby I like the most. That looks like it's very different to jiu-jitsu, although I see a lot of similarities. But yeah, that's pretty fun for me. I'm doing one in 3 weeks' time, going away for a 6-day hike and backpack on and get into some place where there's no road for 20 miles. And then, that's pretty cool. England, fly fishing, where it all started. Well, Scotland, I guess.
We ain't fly fishing now, mate. It is too cold. I think I might be showing my age a little bit. I'm 42 this year, and I went surfing a couple of days ago. Kit these days pretty decent, but I was, as soon as I paddled out, I was absolutely gibbering. I was like, man, this is horrendous. And my fingers I had 6mm gloves on as well. And I've literally,
6mm.
I've only just got the feeling back in my fingers. I can't remember the last time I went surfing in board shorts.
I only come to the UK in the summer. I come to Europe in the summer. Every June I come over. So I only ever see it when it's nice.
You're missing out. Winter's the best time to come.
I can't remember. Not doing it. I'll be there in June.
John, thank you very much for talking to me on the podcast, and I super appreciate your time.
No worries. Pleasure to be here. Thanks very much, Ads. It was fun.
Cheers, John.
Okay, cheers, mate.
And that's it. If you like the podcast, please like, share, and subscribe on your podcast provider. And also remember to leave a review on Apple Podcasts. Thanks for listening.